So the Mime Robber is unlike most of the Doctor Who serials so far, with it being closer in style to the Celestial Toymaker. We've got quite a lot to talk about, with this serial suffering from the previous serials failing to be 6 parts, but let's get into the serial and see how good or bad it is. So we begin where we left off, with the TARDIS still on the planet Dulcis, with the volcanic eruption threatening the trio, with the situation worsened with the fluid links boiling. So we have a very tense start to the serial with this imminent danger, in a way that's similar to the Web of Fear. This doesn't work fully though, as after the fluid links have boiled, there is an extended moment of calm, which occurs before they make their escape, which does lessen the tension. Now this pacing problem will be explained later, as this entire serial has a problem when it comes to its length. So the trio escape by using a device which moves the TARDIS out of reality. This takes it to a place known as the White Void, a vast empty space which the Doctor warns the others not to enter. Now of course the others do enter the Void, as both of them see their homes on the scanner, with Jamie seeing Scotland while Zoe sees the city she grew up in. The Doctor on the other hand isn't tempted out through these means, and instead is eventually forced out to save his companions, but spends a bit of time fighting some force in his mind. So without any sort of presence in the Void that we'd understand, there is some force that is able to manipulate the trio, with there being something incredibly eerie about it, as the audience are unable to comprehend what this force could be. This is made stronger by the fact that this episode doesn't explain this force, with this entire episode being built like a mystery, although the later episodes will ruin this. So this episode is the best in the serial, with it being completely unique, and to be honest should have been a one-off episode instead of a part of a serial, although that would have been impossible due to the reasons for its creation, but we'll get to that. Not a lot happens in this episode, but that's because we've got a very well-paced script which gives us a horror-like series of events once the crew are out of the TARDIS. The greatest scene of horror is this one. The screams are so haunting. This entire episode has a tone and feeling that the show hasn't really explored before, and won't really again. So this episode does feature a small supporting cast of sorts. By that I mean the white robots. So these robots don't talk, with their presence being limited to a few scenes. There isn't much to say about the robots due to their limited presence, but the fact that they're the only things in the Void raises questions, because why are the only things robots? We don't know who they work for, and so you're just left to ponder them as they don't get explained. This entire episode is stunning in its presentation, and to think it might have not existed if it wasn't for the problems with the Dominators. So to explain what I mean, as explained in my previous review, that serial was meant to be 6 parts but was cut down to 5. Because of this, the Mind Robber had another episode added onto it, with script editor Derek Sherwin and his assistant Terence Six writing this episode to open the serial, instead of just stretching the plot out, which as we will see was a good idea. Due to this, they had basically no budget to work with, and so a lot of the time is in the TARDIS and the Void, with the robot costumes being reused from another BBC show, which is currently missing. And there is something about these robots being from another show which no longer exists, which just adds to the atmosphere when you know the backstory of them. Plus this will become more interesting as the serial starts to explore its setting in the next few episodes. So let's wrap up this episode and get on to the rest of it. So the Doctor goes to find the others and returns them to the TARDIS, and then they try to leave the White Void, but as they try to escape, they are overcome by some force, and then the TARDIS is destroyed. A great cliffhanger to the first episode, and I think it's the first time Zoe has screamed, or at least gone all out with the scream. So now this is where the serial begins to fall apart, as episode 2 really changes everything. So this is where the original plot comes in full, with the trio being separated and so have to reunite while in this mysterious forest. Zoe isn't involved much in episode 2, with her being a damsel in distress that's mostly off screen. Meanwhile, the Doctor is the main focus, which does work for introducing the setting. So we've got scenes of the Doctor encountering children who ask him riddles, a variety of visual puzzles, including one based around a safe and a well, plus a man named Gulliver, who's played by Bernard Horsfall, who will become important again in this season. The big thing that the Doctor finds is Jamie, who is a faceless cardboard cutout. So to explain this, Jamie encountered a redcoat who shot him, and when we next see him, he's a faceless cardboard cutout, with the Doctor having to rebuild his face, which goes wrong, leading to him being played by a different actor for this one episode. Now the behind the scenes reason for this is that Hines had chickenpox and so couldn't record the episode, meaning another actor, Hamish Wilson, stood in for him. So this only lasts until very near the beginning of episode 3, when we get a repeat of the rebuilding the face scene. But despite this short time in the role, Wilson does a good job of fitting into the role, with him doing very well at copying a lot of the mannerisms and speech patterns of Hines, although his accent and pitch is very off. It's a good performance and completely unique in the show. Instead of just writing Jamie out of the episode, he's just played by another actor, which is something only a serial like this could do. It's a bit like an idea which was suggested for replacing Hartnell during the Celestial Toymaker. It's unfortunate that this is perhaps the most interesting idea in the serial post episode 1. So let's discuss the rest of episodes 2 through 4, as they're basically just the same thing over and over. While that's perhaps a bit of a dumbing down of it, the middle 3 episodes are mostly the same, using similar ideas and having a lot of scenes which use the principle of the Doctor and companions being attacked by some being which they must resist believing in to avoid being killed. We have a unicorn, a minotaur and Medusa, alongside a comic strip character known as the Carcass. So while they all don't play out the same, both the unicorn and the minotaur are defeated by the trio not believing in it, and the strategy is used on Medusa and the Carcass, but it fails due to the fear of Medusa because she's so real, and the Doctor having no idea idea what the carcass is, so we can't say he's not real. Episodes 2 and 3 end with the cliffhangers of the unicorn and then Medusa, and so we get 2 cliffhangers in a row which are very similar, which given the world they're in is highly disappointing. There are also more robotic soldiers in these episodes, but these are less interesting in appearance, with them being based on old-fashioned tin men, but they do have a very distinctive walking sound effect. These robots are less memorable than the white robots, but are quite cool due to their design. It's odd that there are 2 different types of robots in this serial, especially since they do the same thing, which is work for the Master. So let's talk about the land of fiction itself, as it will explain a lot I'm talking about. So the land of fiction is some dimension where fictional characters can come to life, through the will of the Master. The man named Gulliver is in fact Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels, and so he can only speak with the words within the written text. There are other characters like him, such as Rapunzel and the Carcass as mentioned earlier, as well as several others who show up briefly during the final battle. So this is interesting, having a world inhabited by beings of fantasy, but it's a bit underdone at times, as we only see a few characters, with Gulliver being the only one to have a high amount of screen time. So to talk about the land itself, we have a few different places. The first location is the forest, which turns out to be a book, as what the trio think are trees are in fact letters, which does give us a very interesting visual when Jamie climbs up to look. The next location is the maze, which is just a cave with nothing else to talk about. Then we have a castle on the top of a mountain, which is where the Master lives, and the final battle occurs. Jamie ends up reaching the castle by climbing up Rapunzel's hair, while the Doctor and Zoe go through the front door. They eventually reunite in a room which has a machine in it that prints off what the Master wants to happen and serves no other purpose. So let's talk about the Master now, so I can discuss one of the major problems with this serial, and how it wraps up. So the trio are captured by the white robot and are taken to the Master, who turns out to be some guy connected to a computer. So obviously this is a big letdown, the Master not being this godly being, and instead some guy who turns out to be a comic strip writer from Earth, who was kidnapped by the machine to use his imagination. While it is somewhat interesting having a machine that needs humans to be able to function, it really goes against the sort of foe the serial was building up in episode 1, which gave us a far more interesting villain that was on the level of the intelligence or the toy maker, but instead it's a man with a hat. Now yes, the twist of it being a guy is ruined at the beginning of episode 2 as we see him from the back of the control panel, but it's still intended to be a reveal. So the man's name is never revealed, so I can only call him the Master and call the machine, because there are no distinctions despite them clearly being 2 different things from how they talk, with there being a distinct personality for the man, with him being taken over by the machine and changing his entire persona. Although I will give M. Reese Jones credit for his performance here, as it really is strong, with him switching seamlessly between the 2 sides of a personality. Let's get on to the Master's plan. So the Master brought the Doctor to the land of fiction so that he could use him to replace the man to use his imagination. So I say he brought him to the land of fiction as that's what the dialogue says, which would potentially have been an idea in the original script, but as we know that's not how the trio arrived in it. Presumably Derek Sherwin didn't pick up on this when doing the rewrites, and so it's a bit confusing as it means that the Master's entire plan revolves around something that he didn't do. On the other hand, it could mean that the castle itself, but that feels a bit odd for him to be addressing it, so I'm going to assume this is something left over from the 4-episode version. So to make the Doctor do what it wants, the machine has Jamie and Zoe turned into fiction by crushing them in the book, which is a very nice visual. From there the Doctor tries to defeat the Master through the means of editing the Master tape by typing an ending where he wins, but then realises if he puts himself in the plot then he will become fiction, and here's where I have to address a problem. This problem being how the Master wants to make the Doctor fiction at one point, but that goes against his overall plan, and the somewhat confusing way he attempts this. So to turn the Doctor into fiction, the Master writes out events and hopes that the Doctor will follow these events, turning him into fiction, as explained by the Doctor. So this is both nonsense, but also brings up the question of what qualifies someone to become fiction, because the description of how it happens is so vague. So potentially someone could write something as simple as the Doctor walked forwards and then he's fiction. And given that this is a key aspect of the serial, this is important for the audience to understand for the stakes. On the final battle, this is again a bit of a mess in terms of setup, although the actual battle itself is fun. So the Doctor is plugged into the computer, but this gives him the ability to use his power to manipulate the land of fiction. The battle consists of them using fictional characters to fight each other, which gives some fun visuals and good dialogue, in a final battle which is very different to others in the show. So the bit about this battle which doesn't make sense is why the machine thought putting the Doctor in the machine with full power over it after refusing to do as he was told was a good idea. The Master doesn't find out if it can control the Doctor, and so the battle happens. It does eventually try to use the white robots to remove the Doctor, but by that point Jamie and Zoe have been made real again and destroy the machine, freeing everyone and destroying the land of fiction. So as I just said, the world of fiction is destroyed. The writer is also freed, but his ultimate fate is left up in the air, as the TARDIS reforms with the serial ending without a full resolution establishing if everyone made it out. And this rushed wrap up isn't because the episode was overrunning, as this episode is really short. In fact, this entire serial is short. Despite being 5 episodes long, it's only as long as a 4-parter, with episode 5 being the shortest episode in the show's history at only 18 minutes. How the production team got away with these brief runtimes astounds me, but either way, it means that it's a quick watch despite the number of episodes, but gives it less of an excuse for its lack of proper resolution. So that's it for The Mind Robber. It's a very different serial for the show, and while it has a great opening episode, it basically all falls apart in episode 2. It's got some great visuals, with it using a lot of wordplay to create these visuals, but it feels like a script that was too ambitious for the production of the show at the time, even though the production team does really well despite these limitations, but at the same time feels a bit repetitive and has several plot points which lack logic within the world of the serial itself. It's definitely a stronger serial than the previous one, and does fly by despite its on-the-surface length, but its resolution is completely rushed, and I can't quite forgive it for that. But with the TARDIS in one piece again, and the trio reunited, the TARDIS arrives on the dark side of the moon, where they're attacked, leading them into a battle alongside an old friend against old enemies. Next time, the invasion.